Okay, I guess maybe we should start.
Yeah,
Thank
ready
you,
when you are.
Albert. Yes. Um, okay. Good morning, everyone. And also, good evening. I'm Sachio from the Ventures cohort. This is the Innovation and Finance group session. We do this two bi-weekly basis, actually. Uh, the concept was basically to share some insight in terms of the innovation space happening around the finance area as well. And we started actually having some dialogue a few months ago. Also, I guess with the purpose of also helping out some people outside the finance coursework, but also in the for the subject matter expert people to also help out some people within the lead with their financing, entrepreneurship, or anything related in the financing area. Um, but I thought it would be good to discuss some of the latest happening. And today we have um, Julien will be introducing us about initiative related to the finance transformation in Google. And today I'm just briefly introduce what we have, what we have done so far at the Innovation Finance Group, and also um, would like to hear some ideas, some things moving forward. If anyone wants to do some ideas, we're very much open for this. So yes, and in terms of what we have been doing so far, is that we have people from finance background in the lead, where is here in various topics, and people in the accounting area, also people in the investment, also treasury, also incorporation, the business planning, also like financial projection, et cetera, as well. So what we are also trying to do is to kind of support these leaders as well. And so that is the sort of the background. We try to kind of advise. Of course, this is basically for information purposes only, but that is something that we're also trying to work on as well. And this is actually what we have been doing so far for the past five lectures. We did some discussion about embedded finance, also mobile banking by Manas, also the blockchain initiatives by Marwan, and also digital asset exchange, where Ramon had shared about his global trade acts, which is happening in Philippines as well, as also the future value transfer function. We have this posted in the basically within the Stanford Lead members only, but we try to do some recordings to share with some reading lists. And with these initiative, what we're trying to do is what are the things that we can also apply to other parts of the world, or other areas. So hopefully we can kind of discuss little bit throughout the discussions. And we do this every 2 weeks basis. So we're actually looking for any volunteers to actually be a speaker, starting from 2 weeks from now. So anyone who is also interested, please feel free to give us a shout. All right. Okay. So we have Julien today, talking about the financial transformation. Okay, over to you, Julien.
All
Should
right.
I?
You need to
Thank you.
stop sharing that.
Okay, great.
All right. Let me bring up the right page. I think that would be this one. Let me know if you can see this.
Yes, it is. Yes, it's showing now.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good morning and good evening and anything in between, I believe. My name is Julien Delvart. I am a solution architect at Google. That's not, the useful kind of architect that designs houses and apartments, but the sort that leads enterprise transformation projects. And so I have started actually in France, in SAP Labs in France. And then I became an SAP consultant around the globe. So I mostly kept a cute French accent and natural ability to deal with jet lag. But other than that, I really have 20 years of experience in SAP in finance, implementing finance projects around the world in multiple industries. Um, and I am also the author of a book on SAP and central finance and how to implement it. I hear it's very convenient to raise your screen height, or when you have sleepless nights, it's perfect book you need. All right. So I want to not just talk about the Google Finance transformation, but more around digital transformation in general. And really, we've been hearing about digital revolution, digital transformation, quite a bit and for a long time, and that's getting annoying to me, at least, because it sounds like we are not in a digital age. But out of my 20 years, I think everywhere I went, everything was already digital, even 20 years ago. The only case where it did not happen was when I worked for a customer in France in the automotive industry, where they were still using paper and pencil and catalogs to do product costing. But other than that, in the finance world, we've been digital all along. Even spreadsheets are digital if you think about it. So why do we still keep talking about it? And I think it's basically coming from an old promise. And the promise is that we need to deal with more data. So Hasso Plattner was the founder of SAP, and he said new applications will have to deal with big data. We have to analyze it on the fly. So we have to have a system that is transactional and analytical at the same time. We cannot have multi-stage system that is too slow for modern applications, right? So the idea is really digital world, going beyond spreadsheets mostly, is it has to be able to deal with a lot of data. It has to be real time, and to have one system combines transactions and analytical at the same time. But adoption is still very slow, right? And from a CFO perspective in particular, like they rely on their IT, and IT doesn't always meet the expectations, right? So 70% do not believe their IT organization could deliver against business strategy. 75% of CFOs do not believe IT had the right number of skilled people to meet business needs. 77% of CFOs do not believe the IT service levels met or exceeded business expectations, right? So we're relying on IT to get us into a new era of applications, at least. But they not always, but frequently fail to meet the mark. And even the shift to cloud, which is obviously coming from Google, the Google Cloud Platform is important for us and for our customers. But the adoption is still very slow, right? So you can see here, mostly on-premise, right? So more than half of the customers today are still on-premise, right? They're kind of moving there, but it's still very slow compared to the fact that we've been talking about that topic for 5 to 10 years now. So what happens as a consequence is that the finance function is starting to drive digital adoption and digital transformation in their organization, which is why I want to not call it digital, but enterprise transformation. So we talk about really two different types of transformations. We have the digital transformation that's conflicting with the enterprise transformation. On the digital side, if you talk to the CIO, it's about in-memory database, cloud migration, machine learning, artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, blockchain, and chatbots. That's the tools really. But from a CFO perspective, what we care about is process standardization, application migration, and change management. So it's mostly the people and the process side of it, right? So how can I reconcile those two types of transformations? To me, it's not like it's one or the other, but really we need to combine both of them. And here's a few examples. I've seen in my consulting days enterprise transformation without digital transformation. So we have integration between your company's ERP, your third-party logistics, and the retail customers. The goal being, for instance, to meet the compliance. I'm not sure you know that. It looks like not everybody here is from the US, but the Walmart, for instance, requires their suppliers to meet on time in full KPIs, and if they don't, then they get fines or they get dereference, right? So it's when people really focus on the process without the support of new digital tools to make it better. There's more integration you should be able to do to get there. On the other side, I've seen a lot of companies doing digital transformation without enterprise transformation, where you go from an old ERP to a new ERP, everybody's happy about it. The new one is shinier and nicer and maybe faster. But what happens is that we're still relying on spreadsheets to get in, spreadsheets to get out, right? So if you haven't changed the whole process around it, you're not going to get the benefit of the whole transformation. So now this is very nice, but what does it really mean? And talking about digital transformation, I don't know if you know what that picture is in the back. It's called the Sycamore. It's Google's quantum computer. Right? So that's has as close to the future as you can. The question is, what do we do with those things, right? So I'm not sure where everybody's coming from and what companies you have, but when you think about Google, actually, you have to think about, the 9 products with over 1 billion users, all of them. NBU at the bottom is actually the next billion users, which is, I think, very interesting. Is we're focusing on people who have no or little, only little access to the internet. So we need to meet their particular requirements. And then those features then become available for everybody. For instance, the speeds and the size of the memory on the phones that those people have is fairly limited. So there is a way to not have all of your photos on your phone, and that feature is now in all of your Android phones already. If you have Google Photos, it already selects which photos need to be uploaded, which ones you need to keep on the phone. Before I go there, but we also need to think about Alphabet. So Alphabet is the company on top of Google that owns Google itself, but also all of our bets. So we have mature bets like Waymo, the self-driving cars, Verily, a healthcare company, Sidewalk does city innovations. So we have a number of those that are already live and running and looking maybe to spin up at some point. And we also have emerging. So Project X is where we have Loon and others, burritos delivered by drone type of interesting ideas. But we need to cater to all of them, from very small, 1,000 people to and no revenue to very large in financing everything else. So in terms of systems, we need to support all of those. Our problem was, if you're in a company like us that's about 20 plus years only, and you want to go really fast, what happens is that a lot of our business units have been creating their own solutions, and by doing that, the cost of the finance function is or was increasing exponentially. So we had to start some kind of a transformation. because it was causing a lot of frictions. Everything was costing a lot more every time we wanted to do anything, and we had to, it was becoming hard to control and reduce the risks, right? So scalability is really, for a company like us, the most important part. So the mandate was the following: within 3 years, we will have even more useful and accurate data at our fingertips and the processes and technology to maximize business velocity and growth. So if you break it down, what's interesting is that this is coming from a CFO, and she cares about data, right? Of course, we're coming from Google, right? So we do care about data, but still, she's talking here about not only finance data, but logistics data, employee, supply chain, everything. And the process and technology here, right? We need to combine both processes and technology to get where we want to do. And what we want to do is about speed and growth, right? So I mean, that sentence from CFO is very interesting. All right, so where are we going? Where do we start? Right, so we really took it into three different major steps. First is really building the foundation, and I think this is really the key. You cannot, in my opinion at least, start with all of the blockchain AI unless your platform is ready to go. So we had to shift from Oracle to SAP. And by doing that, we had to rethink all of our data and processes. Our goal was to go back to standard, right? We had our system was way too customized. So we went to 94% out of the box functionality, reducing our what we call boundary systems, all of our first party systems that we had developed, because you give a Googler a little bit of time and access to the system, and they will build you another thing, right? So we want to avoid that and have one single system for everything, and that was really key. So that's really just, it sounds stupid, it's really foundational, but unless you have that, it's very hard to do the rest. And the rest is then really the process part, end-to-end process improvements. So we set up a team of business process engineers to make sure that all of our SAP design was compliant, to have design decisions approved across the board, and to make sure that we have data-driven efficiency. We had to include best practices, especially around processes and data. And all of our third-party systems, were integrated. So it's SAP first and then integrated to the other systems. And whenever we had holes, then we worked with SAP to fill out those gaps, especially around treasury. There was something missing around hedge accounting, spend management, and then advanced management. So from the foundation, which is really more like a technical digital transformation, to go from one system to the other into the cloud, then we're able to build the end-to-end processes on top of it. And that enables, which is really still a little bit more in the future, which is intelligent finance. One of the things that Ashok Blatner was talking about was, if the system works correctly, no human should have to touch it. So let me give you an example. If I create a purchase requisition and then a purchase order for, let's say, 12 laptops, right? It goes to the vendor supplies them, we receive them. I mean, and then the invoicing is all done. If the package we receive contains all the laptops with the right price and there's no difference, why would I need to touch anything, right? It's all part of the process. But we should only then manage exceptions. The price is incorrect, or we have not received everything, or something like that. But management by exception should become the norm. And that is a key shift in what we're doing, right? So, for instance, we moved into a self-service type of business intelligence. A BQ is BigQuery. It's a tool on the Google Cloud platform, like a Data Mart or Data Lake. Then we extended that from finance into supply chain. I will give you more examples right after. Then we can start now having additional innovations like Dialogflow, machine learning, and data scientists to drive automation and compliance. So now smart close, how do we automate most of the close? How to do predictive planning and forecasting? Now we can extend it to blockchain. I'll get into details a little bit later also. We also want to improve the experience, so the user experience with better visualization, collaboration with mobile capabilities. And next is a project I'm working on, which is process mining. So how do we know that what we're doing in the system is meeting what we wanted it to do in the first place? And how can we, reduce bottlenecks and prioritize our improvement projects? So really, you can see the three different levels here, from the really foundational, which could be related to the digital transformation, and then we have process improvements, then all the way to a vision of intelligent finance where we can really focus on innovation. All right, so let's get some examples here of innovations now that we have the platform in place. So blockchain. We have been relying on a lot of business process outsourcing, a whole team, which is then becomes invisible. And when you look at the numbers, you realize that it takes a lot of those, people in blue here to, receive and process, handle the invoice, and then potentially find resolutions and then process the payments. Everything I was talking about before, where if the process meets expectations, why do we even care? It should all go through it. What we do is then have in the middle a blockchain, so a contract that binds the two companies so that we can scale operations faster. Remember, the mandate was around velocity and growth. And a lot of feedback I received from us, like, yeah, but not all of our suppliers are ready for that. And that's probably true, which is why we built a strategy where, depending on the maturity of the vendor, we use different levels, right? So if you do a one-off with a vendor that's really not that mature, we just do a manual process. As soon as we have a repeated, relationship with them, we can start having EDI, for instance. Then they can self-serve with SAP Ariba, which is a procurement platform. But then when it really becomes, a close relationship, and we want to, reduce errors and be faster, we have two functions of blockchain. We have a light version and a full version, depending on, how big and how much investment they want to make. But the idea is that with those two, now we start the full automation process. So we have, a blockchain validation that checks everything that's coming in. We have it relies, of course, on the platform again before that we had, which is all of our contracts need to be set up correctly, and we might need to, confirm from additional data. But the idea is that progressively we want to move all of our vendors and suppliers up the process chain, basically, making everything easier for them to adopt, because then that enables us to scale faster. All right. Now, in terms of analytics, we also want to use machine learning. Again, because of the size of data, it's very complicated to spot any problems or outliers. So we use machine learning to look at our financial transactions and to spot like outliers, for instance, here, and we can look into them. One example we recently had is we have limits to transactions. So like if I were to enter a finance transactions, I cannot post anything beyond $100,000, right? That would require a lot of approvals. But still, if I typically enter a $10,000 or $15,000 a month type of transaction, and this time I fat finger it and I put $100,000, maybe it's worth checking it, because then reverting it, if there's currency conversion, it's kind of complicated. So we can do those before the close and make the close then a lot easier. So some examples that we have done based on this tool, it's credits and collection, month and close, cash collection, revenue analytics, and lifetime value analysis. So again, if you only do the digital transformation, you only focus on the tools, you only get half of the value. But if you apply it to a process, you apply it to your enterprise transformation, then you get a lot more. For instance, the month-end close process, we have our controllers analyze our OPEX activities, and they're trying to find what's an outlier, what's incorrect with a period-on-period variance, and what drives it. Sometimes it's explainable, sometimes it's not. It's a mistake. What is very interesting is that this was used during the pandemic, of course, and what we found is that the impact of the pandemic at suppliers was not the same across the world, and what drove certain things was very different. So it was very, very easy to spot the customers that would default. So that was, very, very important for us during the pandemic. So based on this, you can see, okay, I have identified some of the drivers that do influence my actuals, my transactions, so I can use it then to my planning part. So we want to automatically identify the cost drivers that influence, which GL accounts, which entities, and which cost centers. So now you can see, really what the drivers are to move the needle. And then from there, you could also then see, okay, what are the outliers, what are the exceptions, and what is the difference between what we expected and what reality is. In terms of supply chain, we have a lot, and to be honest, that was a lot more than I expected. So we want to have a centralized supply chain that's being rolled out in phases, and we have a lot of systems. So that's really one of the things we still have to work on to reduce. But some of it is that we won't be able to reduce it because it's a lot of getting data from external market systems. Like the cost of raw materials in some regions or something like that, cost of transportation. So we put all the data together in a unified database, and then we segmented them into inventory, procurement, and logistics. And so we combine that data into a visualization. So Data Studio is a tool in GCP to visualize. So that's the platform on the left. And what we did was that we applied machine learning, and now we could use cloud documents, artificial intelligence to reconcile the telecom supply chain data. So we have telecom information coming in, and now we can reconcile with what we actually did from other systems and try to reconcile those and identify the issues. TensorFlow is another tool, and we can rely on historical survey data and construction data. So this one, it doesn't look like much, but we do build a lot at Google. So most of the buildings look very similar. So we take into account all of the projects, and when a vendor comes in and say, hey, we can deliver this building in 3 months, they say, well, no, all of the projects we've delivered in the past are 6 months. So how come you're getting to that number? So that means we also have more reliable projects, which is always good. Now, this is probably one of my favorite ones. Document artificial intelligence. If you've done, invoice processing with OCR, so object character recognition, it usually goes from about 330 per document to 65 cents with OCR. But what we did is we combined the text that you can read from the invoices you receive, for instance, with the SAP graph or knowledge network. So when we see, for instance, you can see on this receipt here, Angelina, it's called Angelina Paris, Angelina Rivoli, and I think it's called somewhere else. And the big title is just Angelina. So which one is it? Is it Angelina, Angelina Paris, or Angelina Rivoli? Right. So by combining this with our Google Map information, we can then identify which one it is. So we are reducing the manual intervention, and therefore the cost is lower, and processing is faster. So I think that's pretty cool because it goes beyond just the tool. It's combining multiple tools with AI to get to a faster and cheaper process. All right, so out of all of this, what have we done? So what we did is we started this project in 2019, moved from Oracle into SAP. We finished at this summer here, so 2021, so 2.5 years. And we standardized processes around assets inventory, FP&A, cash management, all financials, general ledger, intercompany, controllership, tax, AP, procurement, travel expenses, master data. So basically, the whole house has been redesigned. What's the outcome? Well, it's really a reduction of our business process outsourcing. A lot of the manual steps, integration between systems was reduced, right? And because we had less systems with more reliable data, then we were able to reduce that, right? A lot of the work that they were doing was connect to system A, take an export, connect to system B, takes an export, compare the two files, and then make corrections if needed, right? Like, well, if you have systems that are less systems, integrated systems, data quality improvement, that you don't need to do this anymore. So that as an outcome, we have end users increase in user satisfaction, increased productivity, and better system integration. Now, if that's the only thing, that's already really good. But we want to build on top of it, right? So self-service real-time reporting with BigQuery. So we started it. Now we are increasing on it. Process mining and process automation. So with process mining, you're going to discover where are the bottlenecks, where are the variances, where are the processes that are not conformant, and then with process automation, you can then solve some of those. Also want to use chatbot so that you don't have to connect to the system to get the information you need. Again, those are tools mostly. We want to use it to connect to certain processes. So journal entry analysis and prevention, again, trying to be more intelligent and prevent errors. Purchase order forecasts. So we have a lot going on with purchasing, especially around indirect procurement. So trying to be more mindful of that, doing across estimates, fraud prevention, and smart contracts. So going beyond what I was just showing in the smart contracting. Right. So going back to our initial statement, right? We had a conflicting transformation, but between digital transformation and enterprise transformation, I believe that we can do both. You can, if you only rely on one of the other, one of the two, then you're not going to get the whole benefit of your projects. And then from there, we're trying to reach the new promise. So Thomas Kurian is our CEO of Google Cloud. And so he says, our vision for Google Cloud has always been to accelerate every organization's ability to digitally transform their business and to reimagine their business through data-powered innovation, right? So again, start with the digital transformation, and then you can include your innovation on your company. So that was it for me, and I want to make sure that I do answer some of your questions, and that was probably very fast.
Thank you. We have actually one question in the chat box from Bitani related to how was the transformation project being evaluated, NPV, and how is predictive and analytic work for you? Yeah.
Excellent. So let's break down those two different questions, right? So the business case around the project, I don't think we used the MPV because it's not like a 10-year project. It was only a 3-year project. So it was more around cost benefit, right? So like what is the benefit in terms of procurement and reduction of FTEs and BPOs through automation of processes, and the cost was licenses and hardware and implementation. So NPV is more appropriate for very long-term projects. Now predictive analytics is it's pretty good. I mean, to be honest, I was giving a few of those examples here. There were a lot of surprises at how accurate it is, especially as I was saying, the prediction of which customer is going to default and not being able to pay. That was fairly interesting. So then the AP function, AR function receivables was able to use that information to strategize which customers, which customers to go to first. So that was working pretty good. So thanks for the question, Chandra.
Hey, Julien and Sachio, thank you so much for organizing these super interesting and I really appreciated the walkthrough, the storytelling around it. I myself ran a couple of similar projects, PPR based, really driving cost effectiveness for the organization, and so I can relate very much on the intent that was put forward, and then this massive amount of work that basically goes into aligning the whole organization actually to a new process and really getting the team accustomed and familiar with new resistances, and really getting everyone's behind the new process. And so thank you for the walkthrough. It's very, very interesting considering the size of Google and Alphabet. It's a massive scale project.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for actually, that reminds me, I skipped one slide because I thought there was more like going to be a more pure finance audience, but what you said just reminded me that so a lot of what we did not expect is actually change management. We definitely underestimated change management. It took a lot more than we expected. Actually, the change management team doubled between the start of the project and the end of the project. So we had, if you took the humor class, we had themes. So the project was themed around Harry Potter. N3Q is 9 3/4, the name of the platform, because you go from the old world to the new world. So there was a theme to make it a little bit more fun. And then we had a lot of, lunch and learn, because as you said, the scale is important. So to give you an idea of the scale we have, it's impacted everybody at the company. So that's 120,000 direct employees, 150,000 indirect employees, and a lot of our vendors. So you can imagine that's 300,000 people at least, right, to go from point A to point B. Even down to, for instance, we had 0 SAP when we started. So even the HR department had to be trained on what SAP is. What does that mean if I have a resume that talks about SAP? What's the difference between, a functional consultant and a technical consultant, for instance? So it went like the whole company had to adopt this new language, and so definitely something that we did underestimate, and we course corrected along the way. So thanks for bringing that up, Chen.
Thank you so much. And Julien, maybe if I may, one more question. Sorry, I don't want to take too much time, but just building on top of what you're saying. If we think about infrastructure enabler as an enabler, and that's really the SAP backend, it stretches around. In this case, it's really finance. It can go up to HR in terms of people analytics. And then it can go into front end in terms of ability of reading out all the inputs. And Salesforce, for example, is one of these examples. So the question I have is the example that you're bringing here is really on.
I just finished like 10 minutes.
I think someone's on mute.
Yeah, Kirill, can you?
Kirill, yeah.
I'm back. Finishing up the question, Julien. So this fits very much on the corporate finance. I was wondering whether the SAP then stretched also into people analytics. And question number one, and question number two is the front end. Have you also had to change the front end? I don't know if it's Salesforce or else. To then basically enable bringing all this knowledge, all these tools that you have in the backend with SAP in an easy way for people to then read the data and get meaningful insights to then take action.
That's a good set of questions, right? So so let's start with the people analytics, the people side of it. We didn't. I think, Kirill, you're taking a call. If you could get on mute.
Yes, Kirill, can you mute, please?
I don't know if
maybe he's.
I don't know if you could do that, Sachio, from your side. So so we had So we had started a prior project to move to Workday.
Yeah, I think, well, I had a discussion with you, I had a discussion with you, and a discussion with Michael, basically like a very preliminary discussion.
Karel,
with Michael, initially we had in mind that he will be project manager for Project Oslo, and that kind of.
Sachio, I think you can mute it.
Yep.
No.
Oh, great. I think it's mute now. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So, in terms of people, yeah. So we did that prior to this project. We started a move to Workday, and then we what was that again? Yeah. And so part of this project, though, we implemented a new payroll system with a different strategy between the US, Canada, and the rest of the world. So that was a separate initiative that started before. And then in terms of user experience, yeah, SAP is not known to have the best user experience. We even had to face the fact that it is not GAR4 compliant, which is an accessibility criteria. So it depends on the level of the users, basically. So as I said, we had a lot of first-party tools. So some of them were just, we changed the plumbing in the back to go from Oracle into SAP. So the user interface was the same with very limited changes, like just, the size of the cost center changed, but that was the minor change for everybody. So whenever we could, we tried to keep the user interface, and then in some places we did put just a skin on top of it, right? So especially around procurement, everybody at Google is potentially either creating purchase orders or approving purchase orders. So we try to make that process easier, and we had to connect it to other systems that we had around budgeting. So yes, whenever we could, we did improve the user interface to make the user experience easier, and therefore the adoption easier, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much. Thank you once again for organizing the walkthrough. Super interesting. Thank you so much.
Okay. Perfect. Sachio, back to you.
Yes, thanks. Let me just double check the questions. We have a question from Venki about the change management. Did it cover what works and what works?
Okay. So I think it's nothing rocket science. It's just how to do a lot of it, right? So first is identifying who is going to be impacted. So there's going to be the project team, obviously, the direct end users. We had to do a whole listing of all the systems that touch SAP, and then the systems that do. So the twice removed cousin from there. So because if you change the data, a lot of systems are impacted, to be honest, right? So project team, then end users, then the removed ones. Like for instance, our vendors are going to be impacted if you change the procurement system, right? So number one, identify people. Number two, identify people to talk to those people, right? So we had change management champions, which we call wizards. Again, the Harry Potter theme. We trained them into what is going to change, and what is really important. If people they don't care about whole change. They care about what does that mean for me, really, right? So if I'm in HR, for instance, I have no clue, no interest in learning about what the changes are going to be in the procurement system unless I'm doing that frequently, right? So, and vice versa. If I'm procurement, don't really care about the HR part of it. So, so what does that mean for me is what those champions were doing. Out of all of the decisions, all of the impact, does that mean for me? And then have regular cadence, because as every project, you don't do it in once. Like we had phases. So what's going to happen now? What's going to happen next month? And something that works, then we could always do better is be as early as possible, which means trying to show, even if it's pure mock-ups, to get feedback, because you always get surprises. So be early and frequent is really what works.
Great. Any other questions?
All right.
All right.
No, I just
Well, thank
wanted
you
to
very
thank
much.
you. That was really amazing. Thanks, guys.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much from my side as well. It was really good to know this, and especially the use cases which you put out regarding blockchain and how they are, those are being put out in areas. Well, I'll not say unconventional, but now finance and invoicing and etc. That's amazing. I mean, you will see banks doing trade finance and all these things, but these things being put in finance function as well. It's really good to know that. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the feedback.
Thanks, Julien. It was a great
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you, Julien.
Right?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Thank
Just
you.
one thing. Yep. Thank you. Just on the very last, anyone who is actually willing to take part in the next session, please feel to let us know. And we will speak in 2 weeks.